of what it's like to get that phone call. I have some small notion of that. And so I know nothing that good that comes from this, nothing, even if the best occurs and we really get our arms around the terrorist activities worldwide, will give any solace to any of the people who've lost loved ones here. But it is, my mom has an expression, out of every tragedy, something good may come if you look hard enough. This gives no solace to the people who have been injured. And right now, it probably Americans are listening to me saying, Biden, why aren't you just talking about the anger you feel? Well, I feel incredible anger about what's happened, but I also feel that this is an opportunity, if we do it correctly, and I like the way Powell's going about this, right, that we may very well do something very, very good.
Your assistants are saying to my colleagues that you have to go, because I got to get two questions in.
Sure.
Do you believe that Osama bin Laden and his associates are responsible for these attacks? Do you, Senator Biden, Chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, believe Osama bin Laden and his colleagues, associates, are responsible?
Because I have access to all the classified information, if I answer that either way, Charlie, it's going to be my violating. I mean, it's going to be presumed it's based on information I've been given. So I'm going to, I apologize.
Okay, well, let me ask the second question. Do you believe it's possible that someone could have carried these acts off with the precision of these 4 planes and perhaps more without having some relationship to the intelligence organizations of other states, like Iraq, like whoever you might choose?
I won't mention any country, but I think it's very unlikely, virtually impossible, for an action like this to have carried off without at least the tacit assistance of another country.
And by that you mean more than simply harboring them, but giving them information, helping train, whatever it might be.
I don't want to comment beyond that. Not now, Charlie. I apologize. I know it's frustrating, but I apologize for not commenting beyond that.
Final question. Do you expect there might be military action sooner rather than later because of the velocity of the investigation and the provable facts as to the identity of those responsible?
I think we may be in a position to move sooner than later, but I think if the coalition of the willing is pulling together, as I hope it is, there may be a decision made, even if we could go earlier, to go slightly later in order to bring to bear more of not just our assets, but the world's assets against this organization.
Senator Biden, thank you. I know you had to wait because of some technical problems, and I thank you very much.
Don't apologize. I'm flattered you invited me on your show. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Senator Joseph Biden, Chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. We'll be back in just a moment. Joining me now from Washington is Jim Hoagland of the Washington Post. His column on foreign policy is considered a must-read by many people in Washington and in this country as he looks at foreign policy issues and comments on them, as well as domestic policy issues, but his primary focus has always been international affairs. You just listened to Senator Biden there in the same studio. My sense of his remarks were that, that they feel strongly that they know who did this and that there may be some association in some way with a state and some kind of state-sponsored terrorism and Osama bin Laden or some combination was at play here.
I think that's right. I think the senator made some good points. I thought his stress on Pakistan kind of tipped his hand on who he thinks is involved here and his direct appeal to Pakistan to come forward. I think probably complements an effort by the administration. I would assume that by now or very shortly the administration has gone to the Taliban in Afghanistan and said, give up Osama bin Laden or else. And at the same time they go to Pakistan, which has a lot at stake here, and say, help us with the Taliban, help us get Osama bin Laden. Choose, as Senator Biden has said. I think by and large that is an approach that has a lot of value much more broadly as well. I think the same thing basically has to be said to the moderate Arab governments, and particularly to Saudi Arabia. which needs to come forward, Egypt needs to come forward, to join in an effort to fight the kind of brutal terrorism that the United States has now been victim of, that the people in the Middle East have long been victim of. And it's time to choose sides.
Explain why the focus on Pakistan, other than the fact that it is a neighbor of Afghanistan, and there's always been traffic across that border.
The Pakistan intelligence services basically created the Taliban, with some help, I must say, from the United States during the struggle against the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. And the Taliban has, of course, played the major support role as the harbor, safe haven for Osama bin Laden's terrorist group, which is the primary suspect in this. So Pakistan is deeply involved in what happens inside Afghanistan, has a lot of assets to bring to bear, and should now play a constructive rather than a destructive role.
What reason wouldn't they do that?
Well, they are so close, or at least let me rephrase that. The intelligence services of Pakistan are so closely entwined with the Taliban and with Osama bin Laden, with the gun smuggling, with the terrorist actions in Kashmir, that there's a nexus there. There's a kind of a shadowy world that thrives on terrorism. So you have to really cut those roots in Pakistan before you can really get cooperation. The question is whether the current ruler in Pakistan, General Musharraf, has complete control over the intelligence services. My best estimate is that he probably does today. We have the best chance we've ever had to get Pakistan to finally clean up the game.
So what would be the American government, and with now NATO backing, and perhaps the backing of Russia, China, and moderate Arab states, what would be the message to the Taliban? You will deliver Osama bin Laden and his associates to us, or what?
Well, I think from the United States it's conceivable to make a direct military threat, that if they would like to see Kabul still standing, you will deliver him. From the other states, it is that we will support the American action, that this has gone too far. You have actually crossed a line this time that cannot be tolerated.
In the judgment of world opinion, we have the right to level Kabul if you don't give up the man that we have and his associate that we believe are responsible for this terrorist attack.
Yes, I use level Kabul as a figure of speech.
I understand.
But to take decisive military action against justified targets.
And you assume that the Taliban would do this now?
No. It's not at all clear to me that they would or would be able to find him now in the time frame, be able to organize themselves in the time frame that I think the President realistically thinks he has, which is not long, a week, 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question sooner rather than later, because time is seemingly of the essence for this kind of action, because Osama bin Laden obviously is knows that they're coming.
I think that's right.
If he is they've got the facts, and he's the guy, which we assume, based on everything that comes out of Washington that I read and everybody I talk to.
I think he's certainly involved. It's the kind of operation that he and his associates, and that's a very loose term for these people, have practiced in the past. If you look at the bombing of the USS Cole in Aden last year and the 1998 bombings simultaneously almost of the embassies in Nairobi and in Dar es Salaam, you see the ability to coordinate this kind of terrorist spectacular. And the fingerprints are there, I think. Along with some other people as well.
Like?
You asked the question earlier about state sponsorship. The fact that there seem to have been at least 4 trained pilots who participated in this operation, probably more from what we can gather, suggest that perhaps they came out of some Arab Air Force, that they received help for training certainly and for coordination from secret services, from intelligence services that do this sort of thing for a living, that have the statecraft. I mean, it's not simply that you do the operation, it is that over a long period of time, they certainly have been preparing this for at least a year, you are able to keep that secret. That requires a high level of tradecraft, as it's called in the espionage business. A bunch of guys out in refugee camps or in the guerrilla camps in Afghanistan are not likely to have those kind of abilities and the resources it takes.
Or the discipline.
Or the discipline. That points to an Arab country, a sponsor, a supporter, that has great burning reason to strike this kind of blow at the United States, and the top of that list happens to be Iraq, Saddam Hussein.
Do we know, are there intelligence reports that indicate some link other than motive between Saddam and Osama bin Laden?
There's nothing that I know of in this specific case. If you take the earlier effort in 1993 to blow up the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, there are links there between a couple of the chief operatives, one of whom, Ramza Youssef, traveled on an Iraqi passport and who constructed a very detailed legend or cover story about his identity that depended on the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. There are clear indications that the Iraqis gave some level of support. He then fled, by the way, to Baghdad. They gave some level of support to the earlier operation to destroy the same towers that they succeeded this time in destroying. So I think there's some patterns here that need to be explored, and I would say that one of the main things that has to come out of this is that the United States quit treating these incidents as isolated, unconnected incidents. There is now a pattern stretching over a decade of this kind of operation, bigger, smaller, but with clear fingerprints that you will find relationships have developed between these incidents.
It has been suggested to me by some people in conversation today that the Clinton administration did not want to pursue that connection.
I certainly saw no evidence that they did so in any forthright or aggressive manner. The chief objective for the last couple of years of the Clinton administration vis-a-vis Iraq was to keep Iraq off the front pages, really beginning in 1996 with the re-election campaign. There was no aggressive effort to establish connections that would have required an action, a major military action, that it seems to me that the people in the Clinton administration did not want to make.
Why?
It's risky. It is not easy. You compromise your chances for your domestic agenda. There are a lot of reasons not to do it. I don't say that this is going to be an easy thing, but I think at the same time you need to look at the facts clearly and to make the conclusions. I think that the key moment in how we approached Iraq and how we approach terrorism in the Middle East in general came during one of the periodic expulsions by Saddam Hussein of the UN inspectors who were looking for weapons of mass destruction. And the Secretary of Defense of the time went on television and held up a 5-pound bag of sugar and said this could be anthrax, and a 5-pound bag of anthrax could destroy many American lives. Having signaled the danger, having pointed so specifically to the danger, the Clinton administration then realized there was nothing concrete, specific, and quick that they could do to calm the fears that they had just created. So they switched the subject. They stopped talking about it. And I think that was a terrible mistake.
Do you sense that this is a change, as Senator Biden suggested in the war against terrorism, that somehow this is going to be a signal moment, this attack, and that in the end, those who perpetrated it, for all the reasons you suggested in the column, which was in a sense to show and say to America, you are vulnerable for all your might and for all of your strength, economic and military, and for all of your notions of being a superpower, you are not invulnerable and you're not safe from those who have a dedicated mission.
I think it's important to look at that precisely, Charlie, because what we're talking about here is apparently, and we have to emphasize we don't really know yet, but all of the indications that we have are that this is essentially about the Persian Gulf. What is Osama bin Laden's basic cause? It is to drive the United States out of Saudi Arabia, to get American troops who are there because of Saddam Hussein and to help protect Saudi Arabia and Kuwait from Iraq. Osama bin Laden's objective is to get the troops out. So this is much more about the Persian Gulf than it is about the the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which is at a very high pitch right now. So yes, I think the opportunity is there to change the way we look at things. I think Senator Biden was right to emphasize the importance of the NATO declaration. The United States for 50 years put troops and bases in Europe to show its determination to help protect Europe. Today, the Europeans voiced much more than good wishes toward the United States, but active support in a military sense now that we have become the target.